Welcome, welcome to wherever you are in the world. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, all the above. So I am extraordinarily lucky to be sitting next to the one, the only Patrick Hanlon. So we'll get into his bio and his background shortly. But today, for all these lucky viewers, what are we talking about today? We're talking about how do we date back to the primal nature of branding. Everybody wants to go viral. Everybody wants to feel like they're the most relevant thing. And how do we do that? We're going to teach you the 7 key points, the codified version of how do you build iconic brands. I would say and argue now that as our attention spans go shorter and shorter, as people are scrolling massively, now more than ever, having the value of brand and a brand that you could connect to, be a part of, connect to the tribe is most important. So today, by the next 40 minutes, what are we going to have? Introductions, of course. You got to know who you're listening to, the credibility, the background. Number 2, we'll go into what is primal branding. This is something that is out of the mind of Patrick Hanlon, and it's found its way into almost every major enterprise in the world and why it works. The third step is we'll go through each pillar in detail, everything from the creation story all the way through your leaders. Last bit, we'll go a bit deeper with the Primal Dig. We'll talk about what that is, why the value of workshops come to fruition, and then we'll finish with Q&A. Questions and answers are key on this one. So for all of you that stay to the end, questions and answers are a big bit. So Patrick, before we hear from you, I did want to just say very quickly, who's here in the hot seat? He is a cerebral stud, okay? He's a thinker. He's a writer. He's a thought leader. He is what I would consider the godfather of branding, okay? His book, Primal Branding, is required reading at YouTube. So if you're community building and advocacy, you have to read Primal Branding as part of your kind of melange into this work. Second to that, he's touched major companies. We're talking Microsoft, Google, PepsiCo, Levi's, American Express, Experian. The list goes on and on and on. I've had the pleasure of knowing Patrick for over a decade at this point. He still teaches me things every time we talk. And at this point now, he sits on the executive board of Fast Company. He's a contributory writer to Ad Age as well. We're lucky to have you. So Patrick, thanks for being here, buddy. How are
Hey,
you?
thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah, I
Good.
would like to add into that in that I'm a member of the Fast Company Executive Board, which is one thing, and I've written for Forbes and I've written for Advertising Age. Don't do it anymore though, but the have done. But the other thing that Primal helped to do was it was a construct behind the largest media crowdfund raise in history, and helped to create the concept behind a top 10 album in 2020. So this runs, marketing is all over the place, right? So I have to remember that. I'm good.
Fantastic. Okay. And then the other side, who I am, for any new faces that do not know who I am, I'm an agency owner. I've been a passionate storyteller my whole life, but now it's to the point where it's helping other people make money and help grow organizations. So, problem solver, I naturally fall into this phase of problem solving. My experience started in finance. I very quickly realized that, yes, the financial side of things, very important. Rule number 1 of any founder, don't run out of money.
Finance.
Yeah.
OMG.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the second,
Keep going. Sorry. Go
I
ahead.
realized the importance of marketing as well, because brand was everything. You needed to have something to connect to. You need something to build passion. And I think whether you're an athlete, whether you're an actor, whatever your industry is, having a personal brand is key. And so today we'll be talking about high level brands. And we want to get into this idea because, to quote Patrick, you don't want to be just another product on the shelf. You want to be something that's meaningful and desired. So help me understand, Patrick. Walk me through desire. How do you build it? How do you captivate it? Because we all want it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it starts in a pretty organic way, and that is that our brains, as human beings, our brains are hardwired to congregate. Being alone or isolated is a form of punishment in most societies, right? All societies, I would guess, offhand. And we gather together in groups. And the second thing is that we learn through stories. Stories are the way that we learn. And so we're hardwired with those things. And obviously, those are very important to marketing and communications. And it happens in the most subtle way of ways, I think. And that is, just think of we're born and then we're anointed with a name. We are brought home. Told this is your bed, this is your room, this is our house, this is the neighborhood we live in. This is our block, this is our town, our city, the state, community, the larger community. a country, and we're on a continent, we're on a planet called Earth, et cetera, et cetera. And then we're told we go to school, and we're told what we're good at and what we're bad at, and then we move along and evolve, I guess, and we dump some of the stories we've been told and create our own stories around the teenage years and the rebellious teenage years, and choose not to conform to the stories we've been told, but to build our own stories, and we move on from there. Well, the fact is that we do the same thing with products and services. We have start out with an idea. We gather around, how is it built? How do we come up with the idea? What's it all about? What's its reason for being? How do we know it's us? And what do we do with it? What's the language we surround it with? How do we attract other peoples? What is it not and doesn't want to become? It's for these people, not those people. Those people don't like us. These people do like us. And then who's the team or the leader? Who's the leader? Who came up with the idea? What's the team that surrounds it? And so forth. And so that's a very conversational way of describing what we call primal branding and primal code. So that is how we become a part of the culture, using an organic, human-based construct that works for people, places, and things. Then people include celebrities, and so forth, stars and so forth. But a lot of music people use this construct, and but also for you. So people who have reached a point in their lives, which could be 14 or it could be 44, when they want to reconstruct, deconstruct, and rebuild. I received a note on social media from someone who is using Primal Branding, and someone gave him the book when he was 8 years old. Now it's 20 years later, he's 28 years old, and he built his own brand in the music business, and he creates beats for Drake and others, Ye, and so forth. And so, just so if an 8-year-old can get it, I think that that's just reinforcing the fact that it's built off of human values, human instincts, and so forth. And so it's people, and then place, that's people. So it's for places. Places might include Disney World, or it might include Camden, or it might include someplace else on the planet. And then a nation, perhaps. And then things. Things tend to be products and services, but they can also be ideas, like the idea of um, romantic love, or the idea of gravity. Why do we believe in these things? Even Yetis or Sasquatches or whatever, the abominable snowman, UFOs, people believe in those things. And are they just a bunch of crazies, or there does happen to be a construct behind that, why they believe? So we look at things as being basically meaningless um, in marketing and in branding, and we want to make them meaningful. And so we have to create stories to do that. And but it's a particular kind of story and that people are attracted to. And we ping both the rational parts of our brains that make sense, that tick off all the boxes. You want to buy a car. Does it have four wheels? Does it have a steering wheel? Yes, yes, etc. Right? And affordable. Can we afford it? And then more, I wouldn't say yeah, more importantly, I suppose, it ticks off the boxes for desire, and we want to have that preference, desire and preference. And so we want this one, not the other one. And we don't care if that bag costs, one costs $50 and the other one costs 500. We're going to get the 500 one, or 500 one versus the $3,000 one bag, right? And so if you get into luxe fashion, and so um, we create what we call primal code, and primal branding as primal code, the seven things, and we're going to talk about this morning. And why don't, so that's how you become a meaningful and desired part of the culture, is building stories that attract people who share your beliefs. Once they share your beliefs, they feel that they belong. Once they belong, that's preference. And then they advocate for you and purchase if you're selling something,
And
and they opt in instead of opting out.
and
So
why this is
that's
so sticky to me, I appreciate all that because
yeah.
it is effectively hardwired in us. When we think about the campfire and we think about telling stories around that, it is deeply connected to our primal nature and how we've evolved as human beings. So there is a very big connection too when we think about why we're so sticky to gossip and why gossip works so much is because you feel like you're belonging to something. That information is not necessarily good or productive in most cases, but when you feel that you're connected to someone, you found your tribe or community, that's what becomes sticky. And so what we're going to go deeper in today is primal branding is the way that Patrick has codified this. And this is possible for anybody to do. Later, when we talk about primal branding in the context of a primal dig, this is to get to the idea of these are the 7 core pillars that once you can build these 7 core pillars, you have a very strong coliseum that you could run with. And I would say that the creation story is where we're going to start. That's where Patrick will go into this. It's so important because that allows individuals to know your origin, where you come from. And ultimately, that will drive your why for people to then come in and say, do I want to be a part of this? And that's what creates belief systems. So we think about fostering loyalty and emotional connections. They don't just believe in what you do, they believe in you. And that's such a powerful thing, too, because 95% of our brain, according to neuroscience, by the time we're 35 years old, is based on a record of the past. So if you think about that stat, 95% of all of our thoughts, all of our reactions, how we consume the outside world is basically developed from all of the steps that we've had up until that point. So you think about now a 40, 45-year-old individual, you're trying to sell them something, you're trying to have them affiliate with a brand. You almost have to help them unlearn what they know or tap into something deep within their psyche. And so getting to these pillars, as Patrick did mention when we're rolling through this, the first one is the creation story. We'll go into detail about this, but this is where everything is born. You'll see Netflix, you'll see streaming services, so many documentaries on where something came from. I mentioned recently to Patrick about The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. When you understand who Michael Jordan is as a fixture in our society, as a fixture in athletic and sport, most people want to know where he came from. But when you see the movies that are made, you see the origin stories, it just makes you like him more because you see what a trailblazer, what a debutante he was in what he was able to do. Second is the creed. The creed is something that really defines, well, I won't go to all these. We'll just, flash this. We'll go into the first one. Patrick.
Yeah, the one thing I would say about that, if you want to go back to all of
Sure.
them, is that you do need all of these pieces in order to create what we call a primal brand, or the world's most powerful brands. Let me go back. The world's most powerful brands, that ones that we all know and love and probably buy, Apple, Nike, Starbucks, etc., all have all 7 of these things. And so what I did is I realized that, and I broke it down, deconstructed it, and which had not been done before. This was in working in my garden in Wilton, Connecticut in 2001, 2001. And so then I had this idea, and in June, July, I kind of coalesced it, came up with it, coalesced it, talked to some people that I knew in different companies, Apple and American Express and so forth, and just to make sure I wasn't crazy. And then I was going to August. I took August off because nothing happens in New York City in August. Everyone's in the Hamptons or someplace else. And set up a speech, though, for October. And then 9/11 happened. And no one cared about a new idea in branding. I went forward and did my speech in October. But otherwise, I put it on the shelf for a while. I would talk about it when I was talking to invited to go out and speak and so forth. But anyway, and then finally, and I gave a speech at a university, and some guy came out of the audience and he asked me, "Do you know Rapai's stuff?" Yes, and I do. And he said, "I'm going to take Rapai's stuff and your stuff, and I'm going to create my own thing." And I went, "Okay, well, good luck." It's pretty brazen, but okay. Don't you have any of your own ideas? and so anyway, I was telling a friend that, and he said you should write a book, and eventually I did, and that came out in 2006. So, which was before iPhone, by the way. So so you do need all seven of these. Someone usually comes out of the crowd and says, "Well, I know I love the all seven, Pat, but what's the one thing that I have to?" And I go, "Stop." It takes all seven. So it requires some work, and and branding does take some work. And if you have all seven, you're pretty golden. But the thing is that once you have them, and we'll get into this later, in the US, you have to be in 5 to 7 different places before people even are aware or are aware of you, and you can say, yeah, I think I've heard of them. In Europe and England, Great Britain, it's 12, 12. In Singapore, it's 17. And so it varies according to the culture and the circumstances and what's going on in the society. So to be in 12 different places requires some attention. But what primal branding allows you to do is to the former CMO of Twitter told me I guess he had a something on his wall, and he would look up and said, "Okay, last week we did worked on the sacred words lexicon. This week let's go creation story," and they would do it. And there you go. There's your social. You spread that across these seven across social, digital, and traditional media, and that's how you fill out those 12, the dozen different places where you need to be and be there all the time. And so that can be in the form of the creation story could come out in the form of why don't we move on to the creation story,
Yeah,
I
of
guess.
course.
The creation story can be in the form of a movie. It can be in the form of a tweet. It could be that typical founder's story where it's the original gang standing out in the group shot outside of the building, et cetera, depending on how old you are and how old the company is. And but really, the creation story is the foundation for the brand. A lot of people in performance marketing or uh, trying to do a workarounds, they say just skip the creation story, nobody cares. But that is false and pretty wrong-minded, because people actually do care about creation stories. It's just the way that you're telling it. And so we all know how Apple computers started in a garage. Nike, Phil Knight started in the back room of his parents' house. And if you anyone who's read the Shoe Dog biography, Phil Knight's biography, knows that there's a very rich creation story behind Nike. Disney people, the two Disney brothers, uh, were basically bankrupt every time they came out with something, or on the edge of bankruptcy, I would say, because they were creating these short films that played before the films in the movie theaters, and there was a ceiling to how much money they could make, and each success funded the next production. And so uh, creation stars are awesome, and they're heroic. They're part of the hero's journey, right? Um, and it's the foundation, as I say there. It's the foundation. It's not boring history. It's a legacy
And there's
in many
multiple phases of the
ways.
creation story. And I think, Patrick, it also evolves because if you look at the McDonald's story, there was a movie with Michael Keaton called Founder. If you look
Yeah.
at the amount of movies that were made with
I
major
think that it might have been produced by Burger King. But anyway, go ahead.
and you look at the ideas with Apple as well, you have multiple movies about Steve Jobs. It's not just the Steve Jobs story, it's how do you then justify or talk about some of these environments around why Apple is so successful. I think of the creation story also as the DNA. It's the fabric of why you do what you do. It creates and enables the belief in why based selling because it allows people to care about what you're doing. And so if you're another energy drink brand or you're another fabric and retail fashion company, why does it matter? Why did you start this? Did you just want to make money?
Yeah.
Did you just want to penetrate the market? And getting to a good creation story, to your point, could be a tweet. It could be something that allows individuals to signal to the market, what are you? But the creation story also then gives rise to the creed. So just give us a sense at how do you get to core principles? Is this something that evolves
Yeah.
frequently? You stick to
So
that?
each piece of code, creation story, create, icons, lexicon, and so forth, are points of differentiation. So these are all differentiating you. So if you fill these out, you have 7 points, right? And if you're 7% um, different than the other, 100 pairs of jeans or drinks or whatever that are out there. That's a pretty 7% is pretty good. And so the creed is basically the why in Simon Sinek's vernacular. And but notice the why is just one part of a larger constellation of parts. The creed is the why you exist. It's why the reason for being. It's your reason to believe, depending on what marketing philosophy you're going at, you're coming from. But these are the. It's why we belong. Yeah, just do it, think different. A lot of times it has been condensed down by a series of copywriters into taglines. Otherwise, what it is not is it's not the mission statement, which tends to be sentences long or paragraphs long, depending on who wrote it. And but I think that when I spoke at HP once, and at that time their creed was invent. And I thought that that was interesting because it was reflexive. It told people who worked there, why they came to work in the morning. It was right on the sign outside, and it told customers also why HP was there, and it was true. They were about invention, and reinvention. So
And what I like about Creed too is that it's so interconnected with the rituals that it creates. When I think about Jeep, the American car brand, when you look at Jeeps at first, like they did a lot of things that were very different, but there's this underlying sense of we have a zest for the outdoors, we have a zest for journey. We want to be, part of this smaller community that we understand the value of the vehicle that we're in. But then the rituals that were connected to that is the small little wave when you drove by. So when two Jeeps passed each other, you kind of recognize the fact of, well, we're probably going on a trip to go hiking somewhere.
that's interesting because GMC also they're about professional grade, and they actually flipped a disadvantage to becoming an advantage. And at that time, General Motors was thinking about getting rid of the GMC brand because basically they had Chevrolet and they had GMC. They were both the same trucks. And so if you couldn't afford a Chevrolet, you could buy the same truck from GMC, but you had to carry the GMC badge. And so General Motors was thinking, well, why should we be doing that? So GMC trucks, were generally sold to fleets, highway departments, farmers, ranchers, construction crews, and so forth. And so from that sensibility emerged the professional grade. The research department came up with that, and it took a couple years to come up with a great creative solution, but they finally broke through. And that influenced not only the advertising and marketing, but it also influenced the design of the trucks and SUVs themselves. So they owned the leadership position in SUVs for a long time, and maybe they still do. I'm not sure. Haven't worked on it for a while, but creed is important. So so we know where you're from, we know what you're all about. We have to be able to identify you. Icons are quick concentrations of meaning that instantly signal who you are, and the reason is for that is because icons are also hardwired to our brains. And engage all the senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and so forth. And so the smell of fire, the sound of a siren, something tastes bitter, you spit it out. So these are instantaneous things, and they signal who we are. So in terms of branding and marketing, it is the logo, it is the website. It might be a musical sting, sound effect, sting that alerts us, reminds us of us, and tells about us. So they really icons are probably one, if you think of icons as engaging all five senses, that might give you room to expand in your brand. There was 20 years ago when I wrote the book, not everyone had aromas. There was no signature scent in hotels. Well, there might have been a signature scent in some hotels, but
Not planned, right? And
but we're
unplanned.
not going there. So, but then scent started the thing. I think I want to say that Aveda hair salons started out with the scent thing because they had a thing called they actually captured it as a part of their brand, aromatherapy, and they did it, and then Abercrombie and Fitch, famously in their Fifth Avenue, excuse me, Fifth Avenue store in Manhattan, you could smell Abercrombie and Fitch from a block away, and so that caught on, and people started to do it in hotels, in shopping malls, and so forth. So but scent is just one thing. The new car smell existed back then, which was a manufactured scent, and not not organic. And so icons are very interesting. So you can bring in scent, you can bring in smell, touch, taste, and so forth, and add those to your brand, which might be a disconnect at first, but if you're smart, creative, um, provides a launching pad. Icons are great.
And it becomes a somatic brain node. You talk about the sensory imprints. If you think about a
Yeah.
logo glyph with no other information, it could be in black and white. You will see that if that brand has all seven of these pillars,
Mhm.
you will actually immediately recognize it. It's not just the big players like McDonald's, Nike, Apple, FedEx, et cetera. You can see smaller brands that if you've gotten to that 12 messages in the UK that you need to have, you'll recognize it right from a small glyph in the logo. And that's why logos really matter. And they're a big part of being supported. But you mentioned aromatherapy as well. Now, almost every single hotel has something blasting through the HVAC to try to
Yeah,
uniquely have a signature.
exactly. Yeah. And
So
so they've
it is
expanded,
sticky.
they've evolved. And I think the other thing is that when you get into experience and so forth, which rituals are, experiences are ritualistic, but icons and rituals fit together very closely. Usually, this meeting right here is a ritual, and we have the iconic screens and all that kind of thing. So the yeah, rituals are the repeated, hopefully positive engagements that we have. There are also negative rituals that we try to get rid of in UX, but can't do that all the time. Can always do that, but we want positive interactions with our customers, with our consumers, and we want them to love us and use us. Rituals can be personal. I mean, working out, having coffee in the morning, meetings like this, the Zoom, and so rituals are these repeated engagements that make your brand vital, and we try to make them exciting and positive, and on from there. And so the how people interact with your brand, your package, you, how when they walk in the building, what happens then, and so forth. The people welcome you. Rituals can also be processes that take place inside of your organization. They can be celebrations inside of your organization or celebrations for your customers, uh, usually in the form of sales, right? But the sales events and so forth. But things like South by Southwest, Burning Man here in the States, CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, and other things are in convention Davos, which just happened a few months ago, last month. These are all ritual events that have certain expectations, positive expectations attached to them, and we try to fulfill that. If you want a good ritual, get a hug. If you want a bad one, call Comcast or your bank
I
or credit card
I often talk about
company.
product market fit, the importance of product market fit, because we see in our industry, we work with a lot of tech brands and enterprise companies that oftentimes will build features and then try to sell that feature rather than understanding willingness to buy or understanding that there's a demand for a feature. Let's go ahead and build it. The other thing is why I think
Yeah,
about
rituals are UX. Yeah, user experience.
for
Yeah.
sure, why I think about rituals being so powerful is because you can see companies and brands that were able to engulf our entire globe. You think about Starbucks. Starbucks had this idea. Yes, Howard Schultz went to Italy. Yes, he was inspired by the espresso and kind of sit down ritual that was happening that he was a
That's
part
the
of.
creation story. Yeah.
Right. So that creation story fed into this ritual of how do we tap into the fact that people want to go to another place and sit down and congregate. And so Starbucks branded this idea of the third home. And I think when they walked away from
Third
that,
place. The
was
third
it third
place.
place? I thought it was
Third
third,
place. Yeah.
oh, third place.
Third
So
place. First place is home. Second place, office. Third place, Starbucks.
And so that the concept of third place or being, somewhere where I identify with, they tapped into that their audience wanted it. And as they walked away from that and they started building carbon copies of Starbucks, now every franchise looks almost exactly the same. You're noticing this disconnection a bit because I think people are confused about what they identify with. There was a time where you'd go to a Starbucks and there'd be a nice big red velvet chair that was unique to that location or paintings unique
Yeah.
to that location. And so
Yeah.
rituals, if you tap into what people are already doing and you can maximize that. I think about the market of fast casual food, right? Subway was the best fast casual restaurant in the sense where you walk in, you have a sandwich artist that's making your sandwich, you tell them what you want. They're making it right in front of you. You pick your items, you pick your fixins. You're part of that experience. That now exists. You see Chipotle's as another one. You see Cava. You see all these places that have been built. Fast casual allowed us to walk in and be part of the experience. So I find with rituals, if you could connect to what are people already doing and how do I can insert myself in there, or what are people already doing that I can create a new behavior with, and that's the power of ritual. So coming
Yeah.
into this, I'll just give you a small little thing to layer into. Patrick, here is I witness this all the time, the rise of the internet troll. Okay, you think about all the
Oh
things
yeah.
that are happening now with non-believers and people just jumping onto the internet behind their keyboard to spew hate. And it comes down to someone puts up a video of them dancing. They're trying to make their mark as a TikTok star and influencer, and 80% of the comments are negative. And so
Yeah.
walking through this
Yeah.
experience about the pagan or the non-believer as part of this.
Well, this is a great category. That this is probably what the richest category of all of them. And the thing is you to identify who your trolls and haters are going to be, acknowledge them, and immediately what jumps to mind is the comedian Jimmy Carr. He most half of his show is about hecklers, or he responds to hecklers and invites the heckling. So he's made a thing of it. But I think the thing is to that this is a very valuable thing because in marketing we have the conceit that, which is probably necessary, that our product or our service is so terrific, everyone's going to want this, right? I mean, you kind of need to have that to be motivated and push forward. And so, if you thought that nobody cares, which is the actual truth, marketing truth is nobody cares about us, it'd probably get pretty dark, dark pretty quickly. So we want to acknowledge that, hey, while there are people going to Starbucks, there are people who want to go to Dunkin' Donuts in the States or some other coffee place, or they weren't going to want tea, or they're going to want Red Bull, or they're going to want uh, milk or something else. And once you can identify the fact that there are people are not everyone is going to want us. You identify those people who are not going to want us, and that can help you identify other categories. If you can discover that there's a segment that doesn't want to drive gas guzzling SUVs, then you can create electric cars or other kinds of fuel, right? If you can identify people who don't want to eat meat, you can start making products for vegans. If you can identify the fact that not everyone lives in a family home, mom, dad, and a bunch of kids, you can make um, sizing your product for single people, which in the United States, the largest part of the population is single persons. So how do you accommodate them? They're not going to, in most, they're not going to want the 36 pack necessarily. Maybe they will. I don't know. But the thing is that there are opportunities, white spaces out there, gaps that you would not ordinarily find, and if you're just concentrating on who you are, so think about what you're not.
Well, and you can't be sensitive, right? You have to go out there and you almost have to seek the non-believers or the pagans to identify, okay,
Yeah,
they're not part
yeah.
of this because you can create
So
this.
to complete the loop, once you look at brands as a belief system and you attract others who share your beliefs, and that creates advocates, followers, raving fans. Your fans are going to stomp on any non-believers or trolls that are haters that are out there. And you can see that happening, anytime someone says something negative about Apple, there's this, there's a
There's a
a
legion of people.
BitTorrent storm of people coming after them, saying that, oh, they're crazy, nuts, you don't have the facts, et cetera, et cetera. Defenders coming out defending Apple. So, and that happens in sports all the time as well, right? So, um, if you're a Manchester United fan, that's on you.
Yeah, exactly. And every
Yeah,
sports team is a brand, right? Those are some of the best examples of a brand.
absolutely. Yeah,
Logos, rituals, belief systems, non-believers, all of that
yeah.
exists.
Icons. Yeah,
Exactly.
the uniforms, the gear that the fans wear, and so forth. Yeah.
What's before we go to the next one, what's fun about this too is you could almost play a game with any major category or global brand. Starbucks, Dunkin', Apple, Samsung, BMW, Mercedes. You have these balances where someone will identify with one or the other. And some of these brands can be very similar. And then others
Yep.
can be very different. You can take value-based brands versus luxury brands. Someone that's going to lean into a Burberry or Louis Vuitton or Versace is not going to go anywhere near the lower tier audience. But there's a massive audience
Yeah.
that says, I would never pay $5,000 for a handbag, would never pay for
Well, right. Yes. Right now, the middle class is being hollowed out, and there's ultra luxury and ultra luxury, and then there's the bottom, and the and nothing in between. So we've been saying for years, decades, the middle of the road is where you get killed. And so that's uh, fact these days. So what you're looking for is, I mean, generally is lifetime value over short-term gains.
which is a good
Anyway,
to sacred
second,
word.
so all communities, all brand communities, belief systems are surrounded with people. It's your tribe, or it's your cult, or um, your buyers, your fans, and they all have words. So whether you're a doctor or a lawyer, I mean, this happens professionally. If you're a doctor, a lawyer, you're in marketing or branding, you're a film director, you're an illustrator, you are in automobile business, as opposed to making yogurt, you have your own terms of art that identify who understands the category and who does not, right? And so we spend years in college understanding all the terms and to become a lawyer, an attorney, or to become a doctor, right? And so that's what college is for, to learn all the words. And then we go out into the world and we have to learn a whole new set of words in order to belong. And within the culture of the company that we're in or organization that we're in.
Well, and also in our industry with marketing services, agency, et cetera, we focus a lot on revenue operations and marketing automation. And just a word like RevOps, you would know immediately someone would glaze over if
Yeah.
they're not part of this. So it works at the category level, it works at the brand level. And
Yeah.
when you would say tall grande venti, those things actually don't make sense independently. You have to connect to the brand and know the sacred words. Because if you go in there and order a medium, you'll get the eye roll, right? And that immediately, to your
Yeah.
point, middle of the road is dead. You're one side or the other. So
Yeah. And so chat GPT and so forth. So you have to know the words, and that's a part of and those words can be organic and come out of the community. Usually when the community makes the words, it's probably better than you trying to force it. Because when we try to force words onto the community, they can be kind of corny and inauthentic, I guess. And so there are a lot of times, I mean, TED Talks and stuff, people called themselves TEDsters, originally, or burners for Burning Man, and Deadheads for the Grateful Dead, and so forth. So um, it's moving right along.
the only
Uh,
reason why is because we're getting close to
Martin,
time. So
Martin Luther King's speech, I have a dream, and so forth. So the sacred words. So the leaders, that's the person who usually set out against all odds in order to recreate the world according to their own point of view. And it tends to be kind of a hero's journey kind of story. But the leader is, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, uh, and so forth. And so you pick who they are. The thing inside of organizations today is the leader used to be the founder, and if the founder was very tended to be they were an entrepreneur and tended to be very charismatic. Lately, I've heard there are a lot of CEOs. A lot of CEOs were formerly chief technology officers or information officers or CFOs, and sorry, Brian, and the who are sometimes not as charismatic or don't like to be out in front of people. And so that has hurt some organizations, I think, and that the people are pulling back from that and putting them back where they belong. But these are the people who dare to challenge the status quo, get out there. So,
And I think the nuance in this too, Patrick, is the leader can be people who represent the brand. These can be people that are integral to taking those risks, being the visionary. But when we also talk about who we're going to elect to be the leader, you want to make sure that your brand also has a definitive leader to push the vision forward. So I think
yes.
whether that's someone who's on stage like a Steve Jobs, or whether that's Michael, excuse me.
Well, by the way, there's a difference between an entrepreneur and a manager. And once the entrepreneur leaves, typically the management team comes in and they take over, and it's just not the same anymore because there is the entrepreneur who built it. They are willing to take a risk, and they know what a risk is, and they appreciate. They may love taking risks, and managers are supposed to manage the business and keep it whole and keep it moving forward and growing and so forth, the long-term growth, right? And so they have a different mindset, and the shape of the culture of that organization probably shifts a little bit. So the way that we start out with all this is that we have when come in on a project is that we take all the factoids that everyone else knows, gather them together. We might do some qualitative research. I mean, it depends upon the situation and why we're called in, but we're called in to help launch new products and services and or to evolve an existing brand that needs to apply itself to a new market, whether it's a demographic or psychographic or geographic market, and figure out how it fits into that. So we start out with what we call a primal dig, and we invite in, it can be anywhere from 7 to 15 to 30 people. Some companies have brought in their entire organization, so we've done it for over 100 people. Everyone comes in and we go through what we just went through here, and the 7 pieces of primal code, why it makes a difference. There are more examples and so forth, but we go through the primal dig. At the end of the primal dig, there's an exercise where we provide stimulus like a picture of an apple, a picture of a bird's nest, a picture of a ladder, and we tell them to come up with a company, a product, given that stimulus, and then fill in the 7 pieces of primal code, where to come from, what's it all about, what does it look like, how does it fit into your lives, what do you do with it, what is the language that we're surrounding it with, what is it not, never wants to become, and who is the leader, founder, and in other words, the primal code. And they have 10 minutes. And so rather than typically branding, if you ask 100 people what is a brand, you'll get 100 different answers. And so branding has been conventionally like molding fog, and everyone is kind of, it's this esoteric thing. Well, primal code is a systematic approach to this, and it actually gives you a handle of what to do, and it works. So we have hockey stick charts from people. The primal branding is required reading at YouTube, and so they took a lot of attention to how to do this. When people come to YouTube to like people like Pepsi or Beyonce, or I'm making up those names. So, but when the stars come in, the companies, the corporations come in, and they ask you to, how do we get 1 billion hits? Like Psy, the K-pop guy, was the first person to get 1 billion hits on YouTube. How do we do that? They assigned a VP at Google with that task. at YouTube with that task, and they went out and did some research. They came upon the book Primal Branding. They tried to build on it. They tried to improve it. They tried to do something else. And finally they just said, fuck it, read the book. And so now people recommend Primal Branding on YouTube. And actually, if you go on YouTube and go into search and put in Primal Branding, you'll find that lots of different YouTubers are explaining the book. And there you go.
So we're now rich with time and information. So we're at this point where I do want to say two things before we conclude. Why we put the glacier here is because at the surface level, the Primal Dig allows you to get into all the areas that you're not thinking about. So when you look at a glacier above the surface, you have no idea how deep it goes. When you use Primal Branding and Primal Dig, it's basically a workshop. So you'll effectively see some of these visuals in action, right? Huge whiteboards and conversation. This allows you to think about things in a way that you never have before. So it's not a conventional workshop by any means. This is where you can get people out of their comfort zone. You can get leaders and executives in a company who consistently are talking about risk aversion and they're talking about numbers and bottom line profit to get into a point to say, wow, I've never thought about what the rituals associated with my company are. I've never thought about how we're leading and the vision that we're putting out, having an impact to why people believe in us. So the Primal Dig is a magical way to do that. And the outputs are infinite. You mentioned hockey stick growth. These are the types of things that people have to invest in. I just want to say this to cover my own ass is we have companies come to us constantly and say, I need more leads. I want to close more leads rapidly. We're not going to survive unless we build this revenue. So we move into the Q&A. We have just about 10 minutes for anybody that's in the audience that wants to fire forward.
I forgot we had an audience.
Well, of course. For anybody that wants to fire a question directly to Patrick or to myself, or just philosophically, we'll take them. We'll grab them if they come and type up. The other thing I did want to say is we're talking about building a tribe and how you can be a part of this or follow this. We've written a blog post specifically on Primal Branding. We believe it supports directly the work that Patrick's doing. We want to make sure that you guys can get access to a Primal Dig to get access to this work. So reach out to myself, Patrick, if you want to be a part of this. We exclusively use Patrick for this type of work. So Q&A, I see a couple here in the chat. Let's get into this. Hold on one second here.
We're on @Primal Branding on Instagram. If anyone wants to join us there. We try to put things up.
Question for you, Patrick, from Connor. Do you think Starbucks are still iconic or have they slipped recently? We mentioned Starbucks a few times.
Oh, they're very sad, I think, at the moment. It used to be that when you walked into a Starbucks, the barista, the people behind the counter were just totally customer focused, I think. And these days, so to the point where you walked in and you would say, I want to have a ice grande skinny decaf latte. And we know, sir, we saw you walk in. The barista already made it. Here it is. Here you go. Which is pretty fast service, right? And so I keep coming back to that. These days, it seems to me, I don't know what your experience is, but it seems that you're interrupting a conversation behind the counter and and you wait, they print out the label and you wait for your coffee to, and so even the office dog, it irritates her also.
So I would say conclusively it's slipped lately. And I think the methodology and mentality of service has now shifted to something else, which is much more internally focused. And I think them going away from the third place and being much more franchise and much more stamp and repeat, I just think that that's hurt the growth trajectory personally.
So that was my soft way of saying that.
So Patrick, we appreciate the hell out of you, man. This was fantastic. Your mindset, your belief system, how you've been able to codify something that typically is very foggy, for lack of a better word, is incredible to me. I appreciate everything. Thank you for the time and energy. For those in the audience, we will send this out.
Thanks for having me.
We'll take the slides, we'll edit it down, we'll get a promo cut, we'll share the information. We make sure that we'll have some resource links here as well if you want to get in touch about the Primal Dig. But overall, do not take for granted the power of brand. That's all I'll say. So have a great day. Appreciate you.
Yeah.